Are you looking for ways to build your student numbers and participation in your band or orchestra? This Podcast Plus two-part series with optional video content is just for you. Welcome to our Nollaman Music Podcast Plus two-part series on recruitment and retention in your instrumental music program. This podcast contains part one with the topic recruitment. I'm Ray Benton, Education and Media Specialist for Nollaman Music, a veteran music educator of 32 years. Our guest is Mr. Joe Pappas. As a composer, Joe has written over 200 compositions for beginning bands to college wind ensembles, but he's mostly known for his compositions for young bands and young musicians. As an educator, he's spent 27 years of successful teaching in public schools and 19 years at the collegiate level. He now devotes most of his time to composing, working as an educational consultant, and running his own company, JPM Music Publications. He is also the Midwest Regional Coordinator for Music in the Parks, Festivals of Music, and Coordinator Consultant for Six Flags Music Festivals. Joe, thanks for joining us today for this podcast on recruitment and retention.
Thanks, Ray. Looking forward to giving a little bit of information and hopefully helpful suggestions to the young teachers.
So, Joe, your role as clinician, adjudicator, and publisher puts you in direct contact with music teachers and band programs. So how many programs would you say you contact within the course of a year?
I probably have contact anywhere between 40 and 60 a year.
Wow.
And that's pretty much not only in Missouri, but throughout the Midwest and even on into Europe.
Wow. So, and you've been doing that for how many years, that part of it?
That part of it I've been doing probably for the last 28 years.
Wow. And then you've taught band for many years before retirement, so... Right. So you definitely are in a position to have thoughts and insight into the area of recruitment and retention. So really this topic of recruitment and retention is really two topics. So let's start with that first part, recruitment. Joe, what are some of the common standard items that you've observed teachers to include in a successful music program?
Well, I think, one of the big things that some teachers are still doing today, and that's giving a standardized music test. Such as the con instrument test, and then there's also one called Seashore, which gets into a little bit more in depth of the student.
So you find people actually use that test?
They're still using it, yeah. As of yesterday, I even found that one of the directors here in Missouri is using it, and he recruits about 150 a year.
So when you do that, it not only gives you an idea of the potential student might have and how they hear music and that sort of thing, but it gives them a kind of a confidence that if I get a high score, maybe I'll be good in teaching or playing in instrumental music.
That's right. And the thing that you have to be aware of as a teacher, if you use those type of devices, you have to have a good cutoff. Otherwise, if you give the test and accept everybody, then it kind of invalidates what you're trying to do.
Yeah, the kids are going to know.
That's right. And parents will too. So it's important. I preferred, I gave the standardized test the first couple years I was at one school, and the only reason I did is because that was the standard, and the assistant there decided that's what was best for him. And I said, there's no need for this. I went back to the thing I always did from day one of teaching, and that was going to the counselors or to the classroom teachers, if they were available, and talk to them about the reading and the math scores, because I felt those were more viable in recruitment and future retention.
Yeah, so some other things.
And some of the other things that I feel that are important is, as a director, a lot of times we don't sit down and think about our future. We think about our immediate. Oh, it's important for us to get started X amount of students. But you also have to look ahead and decide, what am I going to need when these students enter my high school program? So you have to definitely have a number. I mean, taking everybody's great and allowing, them to choose their instruments. You need to give them some guidance in that direction. I think you also have to, show them the instruments. Give them that guidance toward the instrument that you need. Not everybody's, suited to play the saxophone and trumpet and the drums. I mean, those are the top three as we know. And I feel like if you need a French horn player, yeah, you might start them on trumpet, or if you have the desire, start them on the French horn. I think there's some philosophies out there that says, well, you start them on one instrument and then switch them later. But I found success will work both ways. And sometimes it's important for you to get in there and find that student that's going to be acceptable to taking the French horn or even the bassoon, the oboe at the beginning level, and then do something with it.
Yeah, and some kids will hear an instrument and they'll just kind of click with them and say, I really like the sound of that. Some kids don't. Some kids really don't know a lot about it, and so they pick an instrument because their band director told them to play it or something like that. But I found a lot of kids that hear a sound and it just kind of resonates with them, and that's certainly going to be a way to recruit them into your program if they hear an instrument that they'd like to play.
And that's exactly correct. I've got a granddaughter that heard the band come over, the high school band come over, and she heard the sousaphone. She says, "That's what I want to play, Grandpa." So, it's kind of neat to know already. And she was just in first grade at that time. But you're exactly right. And I think that the students also sometimes will hear an instrument maybe that their parents played or a sibling or, a peer, and they go to it right away. They feel like maybe that's what they're more suited for. But you have to be careful there. I had a young man whose mother and father both played saxophone when I first started teaching, and that's what he was wanting to play because he had access to the instrument and everything else. Well, unfortunately, I missed something whenever we did the auditioning for the instruments, and so I was having him play, and I was taking and fingering the keys and everything else. Well, we get into band that first year, and what happens is, all of a sudden, I'm finding out that he can't play a C on the sax, and I'm wondering why, and I look down, and he's missing part of a finger. He lost it as a child. So fortunately, we had a music store that built up the key and was able to make him successful. So you have to be careful of those things. You don't always just check the embouchure and their scores and everything else. You have to look at the physical aspects of their character.
And we might get into this a little bit later, but what you're talking about choosing instruments, and directors have different ways that they pick the right instrument for a student. But you've probably had times where you had a student that you picked an instrument that is not the one that they wanted. I have a good example. I had a student one time that wanted to play the flute, and we did instrument testing, and she could not get a sound on a flute. She even took it home over the weekend and took the flute head joint home and could not get a sound out of it. And when I told her that maybe she should play one of the other instruments that she did so well on, she said, well, I've wanted to play this instrument all my life. And she was in 6th grade. So
yeah, it's kind of tough. Yeah.
So she had heard a flute player in the St. Louis Symphony one time. She fell in love with that sound. So I let her go ahead and play that, and then she ended up being a music major and a flute major in college and became a band director. So I guess that's just kind of caution that look at their motivation for why they want to play an instrument. It could outweigh the physical limitations that they might have.
And that's right. And as directors, we all have those stories where that student wasn't successful maybe until 8 months, maybe 2 years later. And then they took off like a house of fire because they had that passion to stay with it. And we had that encouragement to give to them.
Right. So what other ways do you see that teachers have successfully used recruitment programs?
Well, another one is, bringing students down to play for the groups that they're trying to recruit. Right. And, I'm an advocate of that. I feel like sometimes, though, we need to use the students that's more closely related. The high school program is great for a recruitment tool, but bring down the middle school because those are the students that maybe some of these younger students will recognize.
Right, and it's probably easier for them to project themselves doing that when they see younger kids doing it if they see the big kids do it.
That's exactly right. They feel like, gosh, there's somebody just a year or two older than me, and look what they're doing already. So that's a good point, and so I like to do that. I think also another recruitment tool is, like I said earlier, alluded to, was getting in there and knowing, the teachers to help you recruit. I've had a lot of success with those elementary music teachers being the ones that say, hey, you've got a good student coming in here that might be a really good horn player because they've got a great ear. And getting to know the parents is also important at that early level. Hopefully you got parents coming in that you maybe had an older brother or sister involved with the program, so the parent, the student or the family, and you can also make sure that they're going to be helpful with you, trying to keep that student later on. Some of the other things that I would like to, share with them is, when you get these students, and you start selecting them, and especially when you're looking at the instrumentation, the hardest thing for me to do is say no. And I think so many of us are. And I think that directors, especially today, are becoming more selective. I hate to think that, but I see it, especially out here getting it among younger directors. I don't know if there's a change in philosophy, if there's a change in program, or they think that if they take smaller numbers, that those students are more likely to going to continue into the program down the road and stay with you over the years. But we'll talk about that in the retention aspect of it, because that's not always true.
Our guest today is Joe Pappas as we discuss recruitment and retention in instrumental music programs. So that's the...
Well, yeah, going in, one other thing I'd like to add, Ray, is
Sure.
that we, as a director, give the students three choices of instruments. I think, us older people that's been in the business long enough, we've kind of done that along the line, just in case there was a physical aspect like getting braces or embouchure issues or something else that might create a problem down the road, or even getting started. Give them something else to fall back on, and give them a chance to play on that particular instrument in a
Sure.
tryout time. Again, checking everything physically that you possibly can. But anyway, I think those are types of things that we want to look at and hopefully help out to make it successful for the student.
So what do you say to a parent? I know in my case,
Oh, man.
my mom had it set that I was going to play the clarinet, but I loved the sound of the trumpet. I ended up playing the clarinet. I wasn't really motivated to play the clarinet. By the grace of God, I stayed with band and didn't give it up. So what do you say to parents that have their own idea what's best for their child?
Well, sometimes, unfortunately, we go that direction, and I hate to say it, but there were times where I made sure they didn't succeed on that particular instrument because the student had a different idea what they wanted to do. I had a student one time, his parents come in and threw
You mean
a fit.
in the testing in the testing part?
Well, in the actual,
Oh, yeah.
giving out the instrument selection that night, at the display night, I had a parent come in and was very adamant that their son was going to play
Yeah.
drums because they had bought him a drum set when he was 5
Oh.
years old, and he was already playing on it. And I said, well, is he able to read music and this, that, and the other? No. I said, can he play piano or mallets or something, to lead in that way, since most of us were starting mallet players? And they said, no. So we had some difficult times with that parent, and finally, unfortunately, the student gave up because he wanted to play rock music all the time and didn't want to learn how to read. And we've also had the cases like in your own, case with the clarinet where they were dead set playing something else. So I did whatever I could to be helpful to the student because I wanted that student. I mean, let's face it, that's our idea of keeping a program alive and building it.
Yeah, getting back to the drummer that you said, we both had students that played drums on the side and played French horn in the band or whatever, and there's no reason they can't do both.
That's exactly right. And I encourage it. At first, when I first started teaching, I was reluctant to let students have secondary and even, third instruments. But I found how valuable it was down the road, especially if they wanted to play in a different, a different instrument in a different program. I had like a second or third band. I thought, wow, this is their opportunity to shine, and it also helps our program.
Make sure you continue listening to part 2 of our Podcast Plus with Joe Pappas on retention.